Well, welcome to this lecture on the way of things. Today we're going to be discussing the thermal energy in the desert and its distribution and how it affects plants and animals. It's a very important thing to understand about the desert and how heat is distributed through it. It makes a difference, like I say, a tremendous difference on the wildlife, the plants, the animals, and many animals are keenly adapted to where thermal energy is abundant and where it is not. And the desert seems to be very intricate and highly detailed oftentimes in where this energy is, much more than some other environments. Today we're going to use this little infrared thermometer that can read temperatures at a distance. It's laser guided, which is kind of a neat deal. However, we're going to use this technology to, in many ways, convince our own minds of what's actually there, but in the ancient way of looking at the land, any hunter-gatherer person would have understood very well where places were warm and places that were cool and used them accordingly. In the summer, you would avoid, of course, darker rocks that are black and absorb a lot of energy, and we're going to look at some of that and how that works, and find shade. And in the winter, just the opposite. And the animals do the same, and so do the plants, respond to these differences. And we're going to use this thermometer to kind of bridge our technological culture ideas of what is and what isn't, how we discern things, to the more ancient, I like to think more artistic way of understanding the land. And so we'll do that first. That we're going to start off in this wash that's right behind us, and we'll take a look at it first and then go out there and see what we get for some readings. Okay, we have this wash here. As you can see, it's a very typical desert wash that is right on the edge of this lava flow, which makes it for a very nice contrast in temperatures. And we're going to walk on down there and take a look at some the sand and some of the rocks, and take a look at their temperature and discuss them a bit. Okay, we're out here in the wash now, and we're going to play around with our temperature gun a little bit. And right now, because I'm unable to show you the actual temperature, you're just going to have to go with me. And if we move it up and down this lighter colored sand, it's running about, 135, 136, somewhere in that temperature range. And this is a August day. It's about 90, maybe 95 degrees, relatively cool. We've had a rain a couple of days ago, which does tend to kind of blend the temperatures a little bit. And it's been relatively cool for August in this part of the desert. However, we can still see a lot of temperature changes. We got a white rock here that's lighter, just a little bit lighter than the surrounding sand. And of course, one can remember the flat rock, maybe if you've listened to that lecture in this series, and recall some of the issues around it. Now in this area we're in a wash, so most of your annual plants have either been recently just stripped from the last time it ran just a few days ago, or just haven't got started because it's an active wash. But we look at this rock here, and the temperature, and I'm just kind of moving it so we get kind of an average of about 111, 112 degrees, and just inches off of that it runs back up to 131, 132 now, and we're up to about 136 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a fairly common temperature change, even with a relatively small change in color. The reflectivity is still pretty intense, and what that means again is that the area around that rock is a little cooler, and if it was in an older surface, it would have plants that kind of growing around that would reflect a little, essentially, the fact that it's a cooler place. And so a plant that's trying to grow during the summer would have an advantage closer to this rock because the soil is going to be cooler and the moisture is going to stay longer. And we will look at some of that later on. So this is some of the lighter colored stuff. We're now going to go up on top of the lava flow and take a look at some of that. And I think we'll also maybe go take a look at this smoke tree over here and look at some of the differences on the reflectivity and shadow and how that works while we're down here in the wash, using, of course, the thermometer here. So let's go take a look first at this smoke tree. Okay, we're over here at this young smoke tree, and we're going to kind of get a sense with our thermometer on the temperatures. And first we'll start out here and see what we get. We got a 126, there's thereabouts, and it's staying pretty much there. And now we're starting to get some 130 temperatures, and we get up close into it, and right along in here we're getting 145, and sometimes peaking 135, 136, 133, and then as we move back out this way, it drops to 126, 128, 127, and so on. And so we can see that as you get up close to here, even though you wouldn't think so, this little tree actually has some reflectivity that's reflecting that energy back to the ground and actually warming it a little bit on this side. And oftentimes you'll see a grass or something coming up to a plant like that, and then there'll be just a ring on this side of it hugging it that doesn't have any grass because that area dried out faster due to the reflectivity. And sometimes it'll be the opposite. If it's in the cold part of the year and you get a winter rain or a snow even, and it's very cold, you'll see this area green up just a little bit because it's got enough energy for the plants to work with. And of course, to no surprise, when we get onto the other side of this and we get like into the shade here, the shade area, the ground temperature is now here reading 83, 84 degrees in the shade. Even this small piece of shade is able to dramatically change the temperature of the ground. And so these temperature changes for something like a small lizard or a rabbit or a rodent are actually pretty important and something to consider when you're walking the desert as to which, where, and how you might see life. Again, if it's in the summertime, you're liable to find stuff looking in for the cool shade and so forth, and that's the area you want to keep your eye out. And if it were in the winter, you're going to have a propensity for animals kind of cuddling up, if you will, to some of the warmer places. And now we'll head on up to the lava flow and see what we can find out up there. Well, we're now on top of the lava flow, and we're going to get some readings, and we're going to discuss a little bit about what they mean and just see what we get. So we're going to get the ground temperature here, and it's running a fairly cool 145, 150, somewhere in that neighborhood. And these numbers are fairly low, actually much lower than I had expected. However, like I say, we've had a fairly cool last 4 or 5 days. We had a rain about 2 days ago that rained on this lava flow, and of course the water's going to hit that, rise up as steam or moisture and cool it. And we've had some fairly cool and windy nights and even much of the day, which has cooled this lava flow off considerably. Oftentimes in August you can get 190, even 200 degrees off of this black lava. But right now it has been cooled, and I suppose that's the lesson learned here, that even though much of the energy and all the detail that it is comes from the radiant energy of the sun, that is the direct rays. And of course you can look like right now on the back side of this, the shadow cool. Back here it jumps clear back up to the 140, 145 degree temperature, and that's due to the radiant energy of the sun striking and being absorbed or being blocked by this rock. However, in this last wind event that we had, the wind and the rain has actually cooled the land considerably. And again, it's one of them things that one starts to learn about how temperature is distributed throughout the desert environment. And it's just kind of unique to see this lava flow this cool during this period of time, during August. It's the middle of to late August right now, and this thing should be screaming hot, and yet it's relatively cool due to the wind. And the wind is for this period of time in August in the desert, the kind of winds we've had were somewhat unusual, but they do happen. And it's just one of those things you have to take into account anytime you go into the desert, that certain parts of the land itself can change temperature, not just in accordance with the radiant energy, but the wind and rain as well. So it's a valuable lesson and something one should take into account. And of course the wildlife does take this into account. So that kind of concludes the part with our little laser gun up here on top of the lava flow. We'll go back down and discuss some of the things that we've learned and kind of sum them up. And so let's head on out. Well, I hope you enjoyed our little thermal field trip and kind of grasped the importance of it. It's a really interesting part of the environment to understand where the thermal energy is and how it affects the various functions of animals and plants and so forth. And of course we use this thermometer to bridge our modern culture to the ancient. But once you start to look and feel, you can actually feel the temperatures of the rocks and get an idea of what's going on. It doesn't have to be measured in degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius or anything like that. The ancient people didn't have an incremental measurement, but they did understand it. And it was important to their survival. And again, it's part of the natural knowledge for our mind to understand this. And so it's a thing that a person can learn, and a little thermometer like this sometimes will help you start to understand its significance. Sometimes you can see this really well in a light snow. When the snow comes along, You can see which rocks were warmer. You can see the reflectivity. It's a really interesting time to look at the desert when it does have a light coating of snow and watch it melt and understand that that's in relation to the amount of energy in the ground. And it changes all the time. Another thing we want to talk about is that like any food chain or web of life kind of situation, the temperature works its way through that same web of life as one of the many attributes, just like we have followed the wind or certain structures and so forth. And so the temperature will affect, of course, as we talked about, where certain plants will grow and where they cannot. And then, of course, you get your herbivore, whether it's an insect or a jackrabbit or a bighorn sheep or a deer, etc., or bird. They come along and eat the plant and then become part of that accumulative temperature component by taking part of that plant. But they'll also live with a direct relationship with the temperature of the ground. For instance, a jackrabbit will spend a lot of the summer just huddled up in the shade of the different desert willow or greasewood or a smoke tree, and he'll go from shade spot to shade spot. And so he has a direct relationship with that. And then, of course, the coyote is going to come and hunt the jackrabbit, and whether he hunts him down in the wash where maybe the jackrabbit is now trying to escape the heat, or whether he hunts him up on top of the lava flow in the wintertime where he's trying to stay warmer. And so he has a direct relationship with the temperature. And of course, the coyote is going to curl up in some place at night where it's warmer, and the jackrabbit will do the same, or vice versa. The coyote will spend the heat of the day in some cool place during the summer. And the jackrabbit will have both a relationship with the plants, go in one direction, if you will, and how temperature affects the behavior of the plants, and he'll have a relationship with the behavior of the predator and how the temperature of the land affects the performance of the predator in relationship to him, the jackrabbit. So these animals have this interrelationship with the land and its temperature all the time. They make a good part of their living understanding or living or even not making it by that same token. And there's many interesting and turns and twists that temperature will play into. We just kind of saw one up there on the lava flow where the temperatures were considerably cooler than I expected, but we had some cold wind for the last 2-3 days, cold relative to August temperatures, and we had rain just 2 days ago in this area, and that has cooled off that lava flow considerably. Another thing to consider as far as temperature, but it also goes into the soil types. Along this little area here, the margin for life is going to be increased, especially for the smaller animals, an animal like a pack rat or something that might only go 50-60 yards in any one direction, maybe 100 tops. A pack rat living right in this marginal area between the desert wash, it's light colored, mostly a granitic sand and gravel, and this basaltic lava with the patina, the heavy patina that's black. That small rodent, since he can't range far, right in this area, it's an area that he can range two very different environments. Now, part of that difference is the soil makeup, and that makes up a lot to what plants can grow where and when. But also part of that is the difference in temperature. If he has to work to get food in the summer or survive, definitely the plants down in this major wash that's lighter colored is going to keep plants with more moisture than the lava flow. But a lot of times this lava flow, you'll get a winter rain or even a snowfall, and that moisture will percolate into the little cracks and crevices that have soil, and you'll get some green shoots because it has the energy for those seeds to germinate. And the little rat can get up there and eat those little shoots and the little seeds that come from them and survive, and has a food source that's a food source that's better in the winter and one in the wash that's better in the summer. And so all along this whole lava flow you have kind of a seashore kind of effect, but it's in temperature and soil type, not land and sea. The two are working together, and of course with the abundance of food and the possibilities of different times of the season, a given rat nest prospers, which brings the coyote, which brings the hawks, the bobcats, all utilizing this area that's between the hotter and cooler landscape and between the granite filled wash and the basaltic lava cliff face and flats up above. So you can see that temperature is interwoven throughout the desert environment, and of course through all environments. And we're just using this little interesting piece of technology to bridge the gap for our minds to understand its significance, and in some cases, in fact, that it's there. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this lecture on the thermal energy or temperature of the land. And it's one of the many fascinating things in the desert. And with that, I thank you, and we'll see you.